Hi, welcome. My name is Maria Cina, and I'm the founder of Create Her Women's Network. And today I am really happy and honored to have two extraordinary women with me. Kerry David is with us, phenomenal filmmaker, documentarian, humanitarian, and animal activist. We are here celebrating the release of her film, and that will be coming up next weekend. And joining us today as well is another extraordinary human woman, and her name is Elaine Hendrix, and you would know her from her tremendous acting career as most currently Alexis Carrington Colby on Dynasty, as well as The Parent Trap and Get Smart and a whole host of things. But what many of you may or may not know is she is an animal activist and advocate as well. And today we are here to talk about what we can do and about Kerry's film, which is really spectacular.
Thanks so much, Maria. Hi, Elaine.
Hi,
Um,
Kerry.
so, Breaking Their Silence. Yeah, it's a film that I made when I learned just how dire the poaching situation was in Africa. And I saw some really graphic material, and I could no longer look away. And I thought, okay, I'm not a wildlife specialist, but I'm an animal advocate. And if I really truly cared, I have to do something. What can I do? As a filmmaker, I decided to just go to Africa and tell this story through the female lens and learn it along with my audience from literally the front lines of the poaching war, which I did. So we spent a year in Africa and Asia learning about the dire circumstances. And I like to think that the film has it's very authentic, but it has a very hopeful and inspirational ending. And it's called Breaking Their Silence. And you can find it at breakingtheirsilence.com for all information.
Yes, we have the URL for the film on the bottom of the screen, and it is going to be released next weekend on the 9th. And I watched it last night. It is really inspiring. You know, Create Her Network for me is about creating a community of women to inspire other women. And if this film doesn't fit that bill, I don't know what does. The women in this movie that you have featured are so extremely, I mean, they are superheroes. They are so inspiring and so brave. And the adversity that they wake up with day in and day out, not just from the animals being out in the wild and, the perils that come with working with, the five, as they're called, but working with bullseyes on their back because of the poaching situation. And let's start off our talk with a little bit about that. Can you give us and our viewers some statistics about animal poaching? And I know, Elaine, you have something to say about this as well, but we'll start with Kerry.
Sure. So the statistics that caught my attention were that 100 elephants are slaughtered every day so that we can wear their ivory teeth as trinkets, that 3 rhino are killed horrifically for their rhino horn, which if you just take the rhino horn off, you can leave the rhino alive. And the poachers on purpose slaughter the rhino because they're trying to create a market whereby if there are no rhino, then the horns that have been harvested will become priceless. So it's just all about money for them. There's less than 5,000 cheetahs alive in the world today. There's less than 5,000 black rhino alive in the world today. And we're literally in the 6th greatest extinction. So if everybody wants to really find out what that's about, it's alarming, but it's worth looking up. So the 6th greatest extinction. But I feel like now that the world is on this pause, this sort of global pause, that we can sort of take the time to identify our relationship with the planet and with its wildlife. If this virus did come from a pangolin in a wet market, my film contextualizes how that could happen. At some point, everybody has to say, I'm accountable. And you may not love wildlife like Elaine and I do, but if you care about your travel safely, then you need to know that wildlife poaching funds terrorism, global terrorism. And it's, I think, Elaine, what are we saying? It's the 3rd highest funder of global terrorism.
It is behind drugs and the sex trade.
Right. So it's the numbers, the numbers are alarming. I wanted to make a film that was not about animals thrashing around in agony because I can't watch those films. They don't affect me at all. I just won't watch them. And I thought, well, if we could see what the emotional toll, the human emotional toll is of those on the front lines that do this day after day, that maybe we could get behind them and support them. And these women do it in such a heroic way. When I say heroic, I mean I can look at them and say that they're my heroines, but this is just what they do. They don't do it with any fanfare. They do it because they love it. They feel like they're living their lives with a passion and on purpose. And for them, they've never been happier in terms of what they're giving back to the planet. But they did all, to me, feel like they were suffering from signs of PTSD. It's a very isolating experience. You're out in the bush. There's very few people out there. There's very few women.
They were up against rape. They were up against misogyny. They were up against all kinds of things. And in the film, it really highlights what these women have been up against. I mean, one woman who is the forefront of this, they came after her. They raped her children in front of her, and they threatened her life. I mean, this is a war, the dirtiest of dirty wars.
Yeah, no, they are. I mean, it's funny because we had sort of a little chat the other day, but I feel that women come to this in such an important way that prior to my having spent so much time with them, I think that element was missing. And my thesis when I went out to film it was, could women be the solution that ends the poaching war? And I pretty much put that away when I got there. And it's certainly men and women working together, but women come at it with a much more willingness to compromise. There's less of I joke about it saying, when men get into this space and they realize how powerful this is, there's like this big S, Superman appears on their chest, and they're like, because they're saving all these wildlife. I think women sort of come together. We're able to, converse with each other and find that common ground and try to see each other from each other's perspective instead of dominate it. And when I say that, I do not want to bash men. Men have been phenomenal in this space and we need them. But what I learned was that we need them both working together with women in higher positions.
And Elaine, what do you see as a way to combat this and to really join all these factions together?
We were talking earlier about how many different perspectives there are, and how many different philosophies there are when it comes to animals, whether it be animal rights, animal conservation, animal welfare, animal rescue, et cetera, and everybody has their own perspective and their own plight. And I think the real crux of it all is how to look at it as one big jigsaw puzzle and putting the pieces together. Because some people believe that absolutely nothing should be done to animals, and yet in other factions we've learned that certain behaviors and certain helping animals in certain ways that are controversial actually helps. A little vague about it. I don't want to start any big debates right now. The point is I think at the end of the day is to have these big conversations and what we can do to help animals, because the bottom line is that our fate is tied directly to theirs. So without animals, humans won't exist. That's not an opinion. That's a fact. And we are destroying animals, and we are destroying this planet at such an alarming rate. We don't have the luxury anymore to be bickering. We don't have the luxury anymore to be, standing in the I'm right and I'm righteous. We have to work together.
What can we do to help this situation?
I gave a TEDx talk about the making of the film, and that's entitled The Last 5 Minutes. The film's called Breaking Their Silence. What my takeaway from having had this journey was accountability. So it's not that you have to quit your job and say, right, I'm all for the animals. What do I need to do? Where do I show up? Obviously, that's extreme, something I wanted to do and I was able to do. Everyone has a unique skill, and that whether that's bookkeeping or graphic, artistry, you can find a nonprofit that you love. It doesn't have to be animals. It can be politics, clean water, climate control, whatever your thing is that you're passionate about, and offer your services to that nonprofit, because most of the smaller nonprofits don't have the finances for their administration. 100% of the profits that we bring in on Over and Above Africa is we give to the people on the ground. So we're all volunteers. So you're running on a very tight budget, right? So that's the kind of way that you can come in, you can write to your congressperson, you can demand laws. They work for us. The way the news cycle runs, you think that we work for them, but actually our politicians work for us, and we need to remember that right now. So if you feel passionate about something and you have a skill set that you can bring to it, just try to expand your way of thinking about how you could work with it from home. You can keep your job, but maybe you could volunteer a couple of hours a week in any way that your skill set offers. That's how I think is the easiest way that people can help. And there's always, of course, financing. You can always fund. But if you fund, please go that extra step and find out from the nonprofit itself how much of the money goes on the ground and how much goes to administration, because we found out some startling numbers. And so now everybody needs to ask, how much of my money goes to the ground?
And there's websites that can help with like Charity Watch and whatnot.
And GuideStar. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I think it's tragically humorous that we need laws to tell us what to do and what not to do and what's right and wrong, instead of just really kind of knowing that intrinsically. And animals need more laws to protect them. There's just not enough. And one of the most effective ways to do that is to reach out to your representative. And something I've done on a city level, a state level, and a national level is I've done a lot of lobbying on behalf of animals. And any representative, they're always overwhelmed by issues. And so their aides, who take care of a lot, basically told me they're like, the top 10 things that get the most noise, that's what we focus on.
Right. The squeaky wheel gets the oil.
The squeaky wheel gets the oil, for sure. And so phone calls, it's something that's really, really easy to do, and when done in numbers is highly, highly effective.
Yeah, as is making a film. When someone watches and experiences a story, it really affects them in their heart, and it really, really catapults them into action. And it's a really, really spectacular film, ladies and gentlemen. So it's called Breaking Their Silence, and it is premiering next week on Vimeo.
So the film is about women on the front line of the poaching war. I started to research the crisis that is the human-animal-wildlife crisis and the poaching crisis. And the more I researched it, the worse the information got. But I started slowly to hear about some incredible women in this space who were doing remarkable things, and there's a lens through which this crisis has not been explored. And that's the female lens.
We can be persuasive, we can use our instincts. I also work with the animals with instincts. That sixth sense. It's the most amazing thing that God gave women.
I think that is the disconnection that we see with nature. We need to be active in conservation, and we need to work and look at it from all kinds of different angles, find a way to work together.
Whenever we see an animal in our community, like they chase it, they kill it, I told my community that this is nature. We need them, they need us. Let us protect everything. As women, we need to have a voice to our men, not to kill nature, because our future generation needs these animals.
There's an amazing story here because each of these women, I'm in awe of them and I want to support them, and I hope that through this film that people can research their organizations and volunteer for them, fund them, whatever's necessary to prevent us losing these incredible species to extinction, which could happen in as soon as 5 years, because that is how extreme it is. And I'm getting that the time is now.
We need to stand together. and say, but I want to understand what's going on. The solution is a global solution of saving the species for eternity. You can be part of it.
Most people don't act because they don't know.
Most people don't act because they don't know.
Because they don't know.
Because they don't know.
Because they don't know.
You know now.
You know now.
Now you know.
Now you know.
Now you know.
You know now.
So what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do?
What are you gonna do?
What are you going to do?
What will you do about it? What are you going to do?
Most people don't act because they don't know. But you know now. So what are you going to do?
How amazing is that? You know now, folks, you know now that if we don't save these animals, we're not saving ourselves. So all the antiviral drugs in the world won't help us. So you really, really have to care about the little beings on the other side and the big beings on the other side of the world. You know, bless the beast and bless the children. So in case you're just joining me now, I have filmmaker Kerry David with me today and actress activist Elaine Hendrix with me today, and we are talking about the release of Kerry's new film, which you just saw the trailer for, which is called Breaking Their Silence, premiering next week on Vimeo, pay-per-view. So Kerry, tell us how you even just came to being on this journey, because it's you know, you've been a filmmaker for a while. You've got quite a prestigious pedigree as a filmmaker, but how did you come to this cause?
Okay, so I started a nonprofit with my business partner, Jennifer Pfister. It's called overandaboveafrica.com. And before we launched, we obviously had to research it, you know, what this situation was. So I went to Africa, and it was during that incredible journey, you know, walking there on safari with the anti-poaching unit, learning from them what it is that they're having to face every day, that I started to look around, and all I saw was men. And I just started making a few inquiries. Are there any women in this space? Is there anyone you want to introduce me to? Not because I thought of making a film at that point, just because I was truly interested. And I knew they'd be there. I just didn't know where they were. And I wanted to hear from their perspective what it was like. And that's kind of how the seed, I think, started. It germinated from there, because I was at a premiere. I think it was The Ivory Game. I don't remember, but I was watching a movie in this space, and I thought, if I'm going to make a documentary, it need to come in at a different angle with something that's worth watching. And I was watching the end credits scroll up, and it was just man after man after man. And it just came to me, and I thought, oh my God, this has not been done. The female lens. I can tell this story through the female lens. So, I mean, that's a truncated version, but that's pretty much how it started.
Yeah. And Elaine, what prompted you to become an animal activist? I know you're also a strict vegan, but and by the way, folks, Elaine and I have been friends for, we figured it out the other day, 30 years. So we've known each other a long time, since we were both dancers and then acting class together. And I'm so proud of you, by the way, my friend. But how did you really become, you know, such an activist and such a complete advocate for our furry and feathered and finned friends?
When my acting career started taking off and I started getting invited to all these different charity events, I went because that's how I was raised, and I love getting involved. I love giving back. And I felt like I really wasn't making that big of a difference. Like, it was like nice to show up to all these events and do what I could, but I really wanted to have a greater measure of my effect. And so I sat down to figure out like what my platform was going to be. And I just started thinking about, well, you know, what have I always loved and what have I always supported in some shape or form? And that was animals and the environment. So I just sat down at my computer, started researching, and an undercover video of a furrier in a public market came up, and the animal was being skinned alive. And I was somebody who, for all of my love of animals, I had no clue what was happening to them. I had no idea at all. And I feel like I'm actually, that type of mentality is very much the major thought in the world. Like, sure, I love animals. I don't want them to be tortured. I don't want them to be hurt. But I just simply didn't know. I didn't really know. And so from that moment forward, when I saw and I learned, I dove in with my entire being. And that was, gosh, at least 12, 13 years ago, and I changed my life. I threw out everything that had been tested on animals. I got rid of my car because it had leather. I stopped wearing leather. I already wasn't wearing fur. I was a vegetarian. I re-upped to being a vegan, and the rest is history.
Yeah, I mean, as your trailer so beautifully outlines, or I should say, features, is that you can't unknow what you know.
Right.
You can't unknow it. You can't unknow those statistics. You can't unknow how animals are treated. You can't unsee those hidden videos, whether they're from the dog market in China or from our own industrial farming here in America. You can't unknow what you know.
To Elaine's point, and it's a really good point, because there's so many people out there who are like us. They truly are animal lovers. They haven't connected yet the torture that animals go through for our pleasure. And I was one of them. I'd heard about poaching until it's in front of you and you're genuinely seeing it, where you can no longer turn away and you're like, this is happening in the world. And if you don't do something about it, then you're a hypocrite. Or you should explore whether you really do love animals the way you think you do. I love animals more than people. I'm happy to say that. It doesn't. I mean, I love my friends and family too, but we are the reason that animals suffer, and that is why I love animals more, because I want to be a voice for them in whatever capacity I'm capable of. And something else Elaine said, which is so important, which is, we are at a time right now where we cannot focus on the things that we don't agree on. We have to find those things where we all love animals that we do all agree on, and then we have to work towards that. There's a time later on for all of the other stuff, but it's such a polarized time in our politics and our planet. We are literally at a standstill, probably because this virus came from a wet market in Asia. And if that's the case, then people need to stop and think. That's how connected you are, right? And in this moment, let this moment be your moment, that you have this connection to us and their torture, creating this shutdown and this quarantine.
Well, and the wet markets, to that point too, the wet markets just aren't in Asia. I mean, this particular virus, people are pointing to Asia, but they're in New York City alone, there's over 80 wet markets. I mean, they exist everywhere. And it's really about a mentality. When I talk with people, and particularly around their eating habits, I find that is the hardest thing for people to look at and to potentially change, because we've been taught, we've been programmed that our food equals our survival. And yes, that's true to a certain extent, but not to the extent that we have actually been taught. Yes, we need protein, but guess what? Protein is in everything. You don't have to, in fact, eating meat every single day, we're not built for that. It's not good for us. That's why heart disease is the #1 killer of humans. So, we're going to continue to see a lot of viruses and a lot of very unique changes in the world, including weather, including shifts in our geography, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's going to disproportionately affect poorer people if we don't radically change our overall behavior. And I don't mean to really get on a soapbox on it, but we are in the last 5 minutes. I dare say it's even less than that, actually. So, we got to make some big, big changes.
Yeah, and to that point, one of the things I learned while I was out there filming was that while poaching is a huge problem, human-animal wildlife conflict is a bigger problem, and that stems from humans expanding and taking up every square inch of this planet. Where are the animals supposed to go? Like, nobody thinks ahead. They're migratory. They cannot be shepherded into, an elephant, a 2-ton elephant is not going to stay within the confines of a little wooden fence that a villager will put up to protect his crops. It's migratory. It will go wherever its instinct pulls it, and it's just something that we have to, like Elaine says, we have 5 minutes. We have 5 minutes to stop this, It's like, I don't know what it is that we need to do, but like Elaine said earlier, I wish I had the answer to that problem. I know I can do my part. There's smarter people out there that need to put their minds on this, who are in positions of power, that can put this to an end, because we shouldn't have had MERS, we shouldn't have had SARS, and we shouldn't have COVID. We have them because we have entered into this wildlife domain that we should have respected and left that to the animals. It's part of our biosphere, and we need them.
I would also like to say, you know, I did this movie that ended up being a part of a huge new thought wave called What the Bleep Do We Know? And through that entire experience, I really learned that an adage that's used in self-help, in the self-help world, which is facts tell, stories sell. And that's why, like, along with education, telling stories. That's why documentaries are so powerful. That's why, Maria, you sharing your story, Kerry, you sharing your story, why my story of how I came to, you know, be into animals, like all of that is far more interesting to the brain that is seeking like creativity and juiciness. So these stories that we share will educate far greater than any statistic we could provide anyone.
Absolutely. And so, Kerry, your film, which will ultimately benefit your charity, which is, again, give us the name of your charity.
It's overandaboveafrica.com. And it's called that because I found out about this through footage that was shot from a drone. And so I think about drones flying over Africa and protecting all that is beneath them. And so we called it Over and Above Africa.
Beautiful. Overandaboveafrica.com. And
Yes.
your film will premiere next week, May the 9th at 4 p.m.
Yeah.
Pacific Standard Time or 7 p.m. Eastern Time on Vimeo.
Yeah, it's just a sneak peek. It's not actually, it's only going to be playing on May the 9th and May the 14th. So it's a sneak peek, but it's a full viewing. So when you rent it, you get a 24-hour window to watch it. So,
and you're going to be doing a Facebook Live as well with some of the special people in the film. And tell us about that.
Afterwards for Q&A, because they're so successful at the festival level after we play. So it's going to be at 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific. It'll be with Rabia Hauer from Walk with Rangers and Ann Kent Taylor from the Ann Kent Taylor Fund. And both women were in the film. Both of them are in Kenya. And both of them come at this very differently and yet so vitally.
We can't wait to see that. And I'm so happy that we were able to spend this time together. Elaine, do you have anything that you want to tell everybody who's out there?
Watch this movie.
Watch this movie. Now you know.
Thank you.
Now you know. You can't unknow what you know. Ladies, thank you so much for being here today on Creator Network. Again, my name is Maria Cina. We have Kerry David and Elaine Hendrix. You guys are beautiful. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you so much for doing the important work, not just for animals, but for all of humanity. Thank you very much.
Oh,
thank you.
Thank you.